Everybody scoot close together so we got room for everybody, okay? Let me tell you, if I wasn't a smart ass, I wouldn't be anything at all. So, we're going to start our meeting. Now, the normal book or housekeeping stuff I do at the start, I'm going to compress that because I want to give Brian Hermanson, our district attorney, as much time as he needs. But, as always, we start off with a prayer. And I have my uncle-in-law, Harold Hembry here, who's 95, going on about 40. And he's been a preacher his entire life. So, Harold, if you would lead us in.
You'll always have to get to 95.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Hey, that's an accomplishment these days, brother. Yeah, please stand, and then we'll do the pledge, and then we'll get started.
Mindful, our Father, that you are the source of life and health and all things good. We pause to give thanks for this day and its attendant blessing. We thank you for the opportunity of gathering here this day. Especially do we thank you for the opportunity to gather here freely.
Amen.
And without fear.
Amen.
Bless, we pray, our association together. Strengthen us in your service and use us to your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
And Brian, could I get you to lead us in the pledge?
Sir, salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Okay. A couple of real quick introductions. As always, Stephen Phipps back there in the AV booth. These meetings wouldn't happen if it wasn't for Stephen and all his work. I walk in here, he's got the chairs arranged and everything. And in fact, let's give him a quick hand because he's a champ. And then, of course, my co-coordinator, who I didn't expect to see today because he was in Red River, New Mexico. But he came back early just to piss me off. He's also my pastor and also my very good friend. It's Dr. Glenn Cope. And if you want to try a real friendly church with a very knowledgeable preacher, his church in Tonkawa, it's Church of Christ. It's right across from the parking lot for the football field. He reads and writes ancient Greek. You're working on Revelation now, right? When he completes that, he will have personally translated every book in the New Testament. Pretty impressive, especially for a guy living in Tonkawa. And he gives those out, so if you come to church, you can get his translations. In fact, when I first started going there, I asked him, what translation are you using? He said, mine. So, okay. Now, I've got a 6.5-minute video. Are we keyed up on that? There's one of the YouTube gun channels, Washington, God, I can't remember. Anyway, we'll see it. They talk specifically about House Bill 2818, 6.5 minutes long. I want to show it, and then we'll immediately get Brian up here and let him enlighten us on what's going on.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to get to talk about a state that we don't get to talk about very often around here because they do a fantastic job of letting their citizens live like Americans. And so really, there's about a dozen states that we end up really spending a lot of time talking about. But occasionally, one of these other states will do something so totally awesome that we've got to do a video. One, to make many of us jealous around the country, but also to give them an attaboy, and that's what we're going to do today. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about the state that just made defending property a lot easier. Okay, America, we are going to talk about a piece of legislation that really upped the ante as far as how a person can defend property. We're going to talk today about the state of Oklahoma and Oklahoma Enrolled House Bill number 2818. Now, Oklahoma probably already knows this, but the rest of you will begin to learn right now. This bill was signed into law by the governor, Governor Stitt, on May 15th and had an emergency enactment clause. Now, here's what the bill does in a nutshell, and then we'll actually give you the true language out of the legislation. In Oklahoma, prior to the enactment of this law, really about the only time that you could point a firearm at another person was in an act of lawful self-defense. Makes sense. But that had to be self-defense of yourself or another person, you see. What this bill does now is say that, in some instances, you can do the same thing to defend property. In fact, technically, what the bill does, it amends Oklahoma Statute Section 1289.16, which is your felony pointing of a firearm statute. Now, the statute used to read like this. But what the legislation has done is basically struck almost all of it right here, as you can see, leaving the following. It shall be lawful to point a firearm or any other deadly weapon at another person or persons by, 1, a person who can legally own or possess a weapon pursuant to the provisions of Section 1272 of this title, A, during an act of self-defense, or B, in defense of real or private property, whether owned, leased, or occupied by permission of the property owner, and whether or not the person possesses a valid handgun license issued pursuant to the Oklahoma Self-Defense Act. 2, a person in the defensive display of a firearm or other deadly weapon is provided for in Section 1289.125 of this title. As a matter of fact, the law goes on to further define the lawful activity as the defensive display of a firearm or other deadly weapon by a person is justified when and to the extent a reasonable person believes that physical force is immediately necessary to protect himself, herself, or another person against the use or attempted use of unlawful physical or deadly force by a person, premises owner, or controller in self-defense or in defense of real or private property located on any premise owned, rented, leased, or occupied by permission of the premise owner or controller, whether or not a person is in possession of a valid handgun license issued pursuant to the provisions of the Oklahoma Self-Defense Act, and shall not be deemed a criminal act. Now, Oklahoma, I believe you are constitutional carry, but apparently that as long as you are lawfully possessing the firearm, you will be permitted to point that firearm at another person in defense of property. Now, there are a couple exceptions. You don't get to do it if the provisions of this subsection shall not apply to a person who, A, intentionally provokes another person to use or attempt to use unlawful physical or deadly force, or what we like to call the first aggressor standard, which is pretty universal throughout all of the states, and B, uses a firearm during the commission of an unlawful act involving force or violence. Oh, and by the way, when do you get to actually display the firearm in this fashion in defense of property? Well, it appears just about any time, because the statute further states, the provisions of this subsection do not require the defensive display of a firearm or any other deadly weapon before the use of defensive force or the threat of defensive force by a person who is justified in the use or threatened use of defensive force. So listen, what we quite frequently cover here at Washington Gun Law are states that are just systematically eroding away the right to keep and bear arms and the right of self-preservation from its citizens. And it's rare, unfortunately, it is rare that we get to do a video about a state that's moving exactly in the opposite direction, but that's exactly what the state of Oklahoma has done. Because with the passage of Enrolled House Bill 2818 and the signature by the governor, the state of Oklahoma has given its citizens an all-important tool in one of the most important and inalienable human rights imaginable. And it is not just the right of self-defense, it is the right of self-preservation. Listen, if you are a criminal somewhere and you're thinking about going to the state of Oklahoma to commit even property crime, you might want to take a look at Enrolled House Bill 2818. It is a definite FAFO bill. Listen, we're going to go ahead and link it up down below so that you guys can geek out on it for yourself or drool with envy like I did. Kudos to everyone out there in the Oklahoma State Legislature for getting this done. If you guys got any questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington Gun Law by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information's down there in the description box. If If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, cool. Just click on that link right there and tell us all about it. If you want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter, the ability to do that is down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching, and stay safe.
So folks, this is a huge deal nationally even. This is the most important bill that OK2A has ever gotten through the legislature, and we've been doing that since 2012. We've got over 160 bills that we've gotten through, and I have no idea, those are the good bills, I have no idea how many bad bills we were instrumental in getting squashed at the state capitol. And sometimes those are even more important than the good bills we get passed. So this is a huge deal, and please talk to your friends and neighbors. The only thing the citizens need to do to help support OK2, well, we like it if you join and give us some money, but the main thing is to partake. And all you have to do to partake, all your friends have to do, is I have 2 meetings a month, but I only ask them to come to 1 meeting a month to show their support. Because when we have especially elected officials here, it's much more impressive if they come in here and there's 30 or 40 people than if there's 8 or 10. So I appreciate everyone who came today. Don't take what I just said as criticism towards you. It just, word of mouth is the best advertising. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the DA. I mentioned this to him earlier. We get laws passed, but the police are going to have one interpretation, and they're going to do their job how they interpret the bill. And the DA has an interpretation on that, and that is going to determine how he does his job. And of those two, the most critical is the district attorney, because getting arrested is a major inconvenience, but getting indicted is a lifestyle. So I really appreciate Brian coming. He's a great guy. He was at our Thursday night, was at our K County GOP meeting, and he is the only elected official that ever shows up at those. We never see Pfeiffer, Coleman, or Luttrell. So he's not only a good guy, but he's a hard worker, and that's not everything you see in government service. It's all yours, Brian. Thank you.
I've been to these meetings several times. I'm sorry I hadn't been more recently. I'm your district attorney. I've served now for 15 years. It seems like that's a long time, but it's gone by very fast. Let me tell you a little bit about yourself, because a lot of you don't know me very well. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Go Pack. I'm a huge Packer fan. Raised in a household. We had guns in our household. I had a BB gun when I was little, had 3 brothers and a sister. I had the unfortunate pleasure of getting shot when I was between 5th and 6th grade. My family was in Marceline, Missouri, and we were hunting in a pasture, and then we did some target shooting. Had a bunch of guns around, some pretty high-powered guns. And at the end, my uncle and I were unloading the guns and getting ready to take them back to the house, and someone had not put a safety on one of the guns, and the gun went off and hit me in the leg, and my uncle had to carry me about 1.5 acres into the house and to the hospital, and didn't break the bone, but cracked the bone, and wore a cast most of that summer. My mom then took the guns out of our house for a while, but I continued to shoot when Boy Scouts, and when my daughters were old enough for Girl Scouts, I taught them how to shoot at that programs and the like. As DA, I have the right to carry anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. Probably the only exception to that would be federal lands, but it's certainly, like state capitol, no one's allowed to carry guns in. DAs are allowed to carry it in. I have a special license for that. I can carry it into a bank, I can carry it into a church, anywhere, even though they don't want me to have it because of the personal safety of the district attorney and the number of people that we tend to upset during the course of a year, including gangs and all those groups that we are allowed to carry anywhere. I don't carry often. For 1.5 years, I carried every day when I had a threat against my life. If I don't have a known threat, I try not to carry it unless it's for circumstances dictate it. But I'm not afraid of someone taking my life, but I'll be ready if I need to be. Tell you a little bit about what's going on in our fine city. Guns are a huge thing in crimes these days. We are seeing more and more people carrying guns that are committing crimes. You'd be shocked at how many drive-by shootings occur in Kay County on a regular basis. We've had sometimes 3 or 4 a night happen with drive-by shootings. And those are difficult to prove because you have to find out whose car it was and then who was driving the car and then who was pulling the trigger. But we have successfully prosecuted some of those, and we're still dealing with that. The number of minors walking the streets at night looking for opportunities to burglarize something is huge, and many of them are carrying guns. We have had cases where we've had 13-year-olds on the street at night carrying guns. The only reason I mention that is they're getting their guns from people's cars. If you have a vehicle, lock it up at night. If you have a gun, you leave your gun in the vehicle, certainly lock it up at night, because that's where a lot of those guns are getting out in the community. They're robbing, looking for change and stuff like that, but if they find a gun, that's a home run for the people that are doing that. And so just be cautious of that. You shouldn't think you'd have to say that. You know that you don't want to lose your guns. You're going to lock up the car, but some people just don't think to do that, and it's better for them to do that. The crimes that we charge, we take them very seriously. As Terry said, law enforcement sends up cases to us. We receive cases from almost any type of law enforcement agency you can imagine. We receive cases from the OSBI, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. We receive it from the Wildlife Department, from the Cattlemen's Association, from every police department, every sheriff's department. We work with the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the DEA, ATF, and all those groups work with us on a regular basis. And so we have a lot of things that we review on a daily basis. Every case that comes into my office comes through my desk. I determine which ADA is going to handle that, or if I'm going to handle that case. Usually I handle the murders, the more serious cases. I have a special prosecutor that handles the rape cases and crimes against children. I also handle anything regarding law enforcement officers regarding discharge of firearm by them or towards them. I handle a full caseload. I handle the largest caseload in our office on a year-to-year basis. We have a lot of cases at any given time. I would imagine at any given time we have over 1,000 cases per lawyer that we're handling. And so if someone comes to me and says, "What about this such case?" I'll have to think, and unless I've done something with it recently, I'll probably have to look up the name, because I don't worry about names so much as I do about the facts of the situation. So, but we are a very, very busy district attorney's office. Since serving as district attorney, I've received awards. I've been named outstanding district attorney in the state of Oklahoma by my fellow DAs. I've been president of the District Attorney Association, president of the Oklahoma District Attorneys Association, and the District Attorneys Council. I serve on the 5-member board that sets policy for all the district attorneys in the state of Oklahoma. So I'm very active there. I also serve as chair of the JAG board. The JAG board distributes federal funds to task forces and other agencies in the state. We take federal funds the feds give us and determine what agencies get those and how much they get. And we do that every other year. We're in the middle of that process right now. So I'm not only busy working for you all, but working for the other district attorneys to see that we're all are able to operate efficiently in the state. Just 2 years ago, I served as president of the Oklahoma Bar Association, which means I was president of an organization that every judge and every attorney, whether a prosecutor, defense attorney, civil lawyer, all 19,000 lawyers in the state of Oklahoma, I was president of their organization and served in that capacity for a year and still carried my full caseload and the like. I don't sleep a lot. I tend to go to bed late and get up early so I can get everything done, but that's what I've done my whole life, and that's okay. Terry wanted me to talk to you about some of the new laws that just came down from the legislature. And so obviously the main one is 2818, which you just heard about. He said it better than I could ever say it. That law just was signed by the governor. It's an emergency, so it's in effect right as we speak. The law changed an existing law, and I should tell you that the first time I looked at this law was when Terry called me and said, we'd like you to talk about that. Seeing it wasn't in effect, governor hadn't signed it yet. I try not, we look at laws while they're before the legislature just to determine if we want to have some feedback on it, if we want to tell them some thoughts about whether it needs to be tweaked this way or that way to deal with the realities of life. But there's so many things, the legislature has thousands of bills they look at every year, and there's no reason to look at it until it becomes law. And so after Terry mentioned it, I went ahead and looked at it, and I think, as I said, this man made a very good discussion on it. How we deal with these laws is if every time a case comes in, we pull the statute and we look at the statute to see how it fits within the statute. There are certain statutes I don't have to look at. 1283, which deals with felon in possession of a firearm. I know I've handled hundreds of cases like that. 1286, dealing with a felon using a gun in a crime. I've dealt with that case. There's a lot of those statutes we deal with on a regular basis. So this is when we get a case like this, we have to look closely at it. Gun cases are usually cases that come to me, quite frankly, because I take them seriously. Certainly, I respect the rights of the citizenry to own guns. I also expect that people act appropriately when they have the guns and follow the law. Obviously, nothing could be more deadly than someone pulling a gun and using it in an inappropriate way, whether it be a bad guy, a good guy, or anyone else. And obviously, when someone pulls a gun, they potentially put a lot of people at risk. I talked to Joe Baden just Thursday night, and he mentioned he was a witness in a case where a gentleman had what we thought was a firearm. Later on, we found out it was an imitation firearm. But the police were confronting him, and there was they chased him, and the man ended up getting shot because he pointed something. They thought it pointed a firearm at them, and they responded with fire. I meant Joe witnessed the early parts of that because he was in the neighborhood putting up signs for an issue, and saw the guy when he was running through it, and he made a comment to me. I had a shot. I looked like he had a gun in his hand, and he was walking up to this person's house, and I thought about pulling my gun, and then I realized there was a street behind there with cars going back and forth, and it would not be a safe shot. And those are the things we worry about. The bystanders, who's being at risk, is the person making good decisions in how they handle the gun and the firearm, and is it appropriate at that time because of the fact situation. I had a member of my church that asked me and Harold and I go to church together, and they asked me to carry on Sundays when there was a lot of violence going on, and I did for quite a while. But I told him, I said, I cannot think of too many situations where pulling a gun in a crowded church building is a good idea, because the bullet doesn't stop when I just miss. It goes until it hits something, and I don't want it to hit someone else. And so those are all things important to deal with. It's good music. I understand. And so it's critically important to look at what the circumstances are. And we always, when we're filing charges, we try to look at all facts and circumstances. Look to see what the person was doing, what were they faced with, what would a reasonable person do in that situation faced with that type of issue. There's a time when it's appropriate to pull a gun. There's times when it's not. There's times when it's appropriate to use a gun. There's times when it's not. And for us, you say that there's a bright line here or there. It's difficult to do that. I prefer to deal with specific scenarios that we're dealt with. And we have one right now in our office, and it happened before this came into effect, even though this will affect our decision-making processes now that I know that the changes are in effect, where a person saw some people fighting in the street and pulled a gun and fired the gun a couple times. And the question is, was that a righteous shoot when there was no deadly force involved, when there were just people in a fist fight? Is it appropriate, A, to pull a firearm, and B, discharging a firearm in a neighborhood? Is that an appropriate thing to do? And we're still wrestling with that issue, trying to determine what the right thing to do is. A lot of times it's not an easy answer. and you have to look at all the circumstances and make decisions based on that. The main thing that 2818 did was it expanded the use of guns in protecting your property. It's a huge change, because it's, for oftentimes, use of deadly force to protect property is somewhat suspect in the law, and this does change that. It says that the previous law about not pulling a firearm shall not apply to persons acting in self-defense, which clearly that's the situation, or to home or business owners in defense of their private property, whether or not they possess a valid handgun license or not. So you can pull a gun to protect your home and your business owners. Classic case we had several years ago in Oklahoma County was the druggist that had a guy come into their store and robbed him. You all probably remember that. And he shot the person, and there were a lot of other issues in there, but that was the main issue of whether or not he could use a firearm to protect his property. And he was convicted and ended up going to prison. I think he's still in prison at this time. This change might have changed the outcome of that case. There was other questions about whether he shot after the guy was helpless or not, and I was not involved in that case. I can't tell you all that, but this certainly would have an effect on that. I'm surprised that it doesn't have other language in it. So usually you can use a gun to protect yourself and others. So if someone else was, let's say someone was pointing a gun at someone else, you'd have the right to protect that person. This doesn't say that in here. I still think we would look at that. It's used again, the all facts and circumstance approach, and look and see whether or not it was righteous because he was saving a life by doing his action. And again, that assumes the bad person was the one with the gun that was pointing at the other one. You have to assume a lot of facts, and you have to be careful in all those situations. But again, this is a huge change, and again, for the Second Amendment folks such as ourselves, it provides an ability to know that if someone comes to your house to try to rob it, that you have a right to use self-defense. I would argue many times you're protecting yourself too. I know all of us probably have a gun close by to our bed or close by where we can get to it if at night, so that to protect ourselves if someone tries to come into the house. And so, and again, these are my interpretations. At some point, a judge in a black robe is going to make a determination about what the law is, and that can change as time goes by. But I think clearly in Oklahoma, there is certainly a pro right of being able to protect yourself and use whatever weaponry that is appropriate under the circumstances. As the man on the tape said, that a person who has a legal right to own or possess a firearm can do certain things. And the language who can legally own or possess, it goes back to the felons. If a person is a convicted felon, they shouldn't have a gun available to them. And you may not like that law. There's a whole litany of cases right now coming out about that. We had a case that came from the Court of Criminal Appeals just 6 months ago. The law in Oklahoma was that a convicted felon could not own a firearm, a rifle, pistol, firearm, an altered toy gun, an imitation gun, or those were the selections. And the reason they say altered toy gun, because you remember back in the day, the little toy guns all had an orange tip on the end, and people would cut off that orange tip or paint it black so that people couldn't tell it was a toy gun. And they said, no, you can't do that. Well, nowadays, I don't know if any of you ever looked, but you can look at Glock BB guns, and you go to it. Glock manufactures a BB gun that doesn't have an orange tip. It does or doesn't. You can order it either way. That looks exactly like a Glock. I carry a Glock, and I know what a Glock looks like. And I look at this, and it's got the hole. The hole is the size of a Glock hole, not as a BB gun. If a person would have that on their person, that would be, you'd naturally assume that was a real firearm. And the law says imitation. But there were case law that came out for a long time in Oklahoma saying that a BB gun was not an imitation gun, and therefore that dates back to the 60s, before when all the guns had orange tips. Now that this has changed, the Supreme Court of Criminal Appeals has ruled that no, a BB gun can be an imitation gun if it's made to look and seemed to be a real gun. And and I would ask you, if you have kids, don't give them a real looking BB gun. There's so many times officers are put in terrible situations where they have to make a split-second decision by a gun pointing at them that's probably what could be fake, could be real, and they have to make that choice. And I've seen officers, after they've pulled the trigger to protect themselves or others, and the pain they go through when they realize they have shot someone that has an artificial gun or imitation gun. It is, many people leave the force with that type of burden on their shoulders. The police officers have a terrible risks they go through every day, every time they walk up to a vehicle that has tinted windows. I mean, we've all seen the videos probably on TV where someone comes out with a gun and shooting at an officer. You've seen some of the cases where process servers have been shot knocking on a door to deliver a subpoena or a summons of some sort. Now you guys can have a fake imitation gun because you're not convicted felons. But the 1283 deals with convicted felons only. Again, just you got to make sure that the officers may not know that that is an imitation firearm. The law also is, and I think most of you probably know this, is that if you do have a firearm in your car, that if an officer pulls you over, one of the first things you should do is tell them that you have a gun in your car. I do that, even though I'm the DA, even though that officer knows that I'm a prosecutor, I will immediately tell them that I have a license to carry and that I'm carrying. Or even if I'm not carrying, I will tell them I have a license to carry and I'm not carrying right now. I also tell them that I have a box of ammo underneath my seat. And they'll say, thank you for telling me. I also know that they pull up your name, that's going to say that you have a permit of some sort if you have a permit. So, because they need to know if someone's a convicted felon, they need to know if that person is carrying a firearm. And I believe those licenses show up on that. I'm not positive on that, but tell them. Just don't avoid the problem that the suspicion, because an officer is going to be upset if he finds out that you have a gun on your person and they didn't know about it, or that there's a gun right hidden next to you in the seat or in the door of the vehicle. It just makes sense to tell them, because the officer will appreciate your candor in those regards. I've been in situations where we've gone to minority groups and spoke to them about firearms and how not to get crosswise with law enforcement officers, and explain to them, and the standard things are keep your hands on the steering wheel. If the officer comes up and it's dark at night, it may not hurt to put your hands out the window so you can see your hands. Just give that officer a comfort level when they come up and he sees that you're trying to cooperate as much as possible. It just makes sense to do it. You don't have to do that, but it makes sense to try to do anything to tone down the circumstances of that individual stop, because it's going to be nerve-wracking anytime you do something like that at night. So, again, just thoughts for that. House Bill 2818, which we've been talking about, says it should be unlawful for any person to willfully and without lawful cause to point a firearm, knife, or any other deadly weapon, threatening or with the intention of discharging the firearm, or with any malice or for any purpose of injuring, either through physical injury or mental or emotional intimidation. Again, I'd like to think none of us would do that. We wouldn't, just because we're upset at someone, pull a gun on them and say, you better back up or I'm gonna. It's raising it to deadly force. You got to be careful about raising something to deadly force. Obviously, you have a right to freedom of speech, but once you pull that gun out of there, that's going to escalate. And we see the road rage situations. We see the other situations out there. It's best not to to raise that level of anger at that location. Again, there's a lot of, they added in that same statute a lot of things about if you're in an occupied premise, you have additional protection. Again, that makes sense. If you're at your home, it's your home. You have a right to protect yourself. You have a right to safety. And again, there's all sorts of horror stories out there about that. Terry gave me another couple statutes to look at that came out from on the OK2A list. One of them is the Municipal Municipal Carry Act. And this basically says that a city can pass laws governing whether or not you can carry handguns into any of the city buildings and city properties, and set guidelines for that. And I'm assuming that they will do that with the passing of this law. It also says that in this act and in the act dealing with, let me find it here. Yeah, in Senate Bill 742, they say whether or not municipal or sitting state judges have the power to carry firearms. Right now, judges have the right to carry firearms, and I can tell you that judges throughout the state do, not all, but some carry firearms. We're fortunate in Kay County, we usually have 1 or 2 deputies in a courtroom when we're doing criminal cases, because you never know what someone's going to do when they find out they're going to prison, or they find out that someone is not going to prison, where someone is a victim and they want to strike out. We've had many people run from the courtroom before where they get chased now. Bad news for them, right across the street is a police station, so you're not going to get too far where there's law enforcement right there, but it's amazing what people will do, and they now have a new charge of eluding arrest. And so I guess my main point in all this is that while these laws provide some extra protection, I still think you have to use common sense and protect yourselves as best you can, and be smart when you pull a gun from your holster or from your waistline. I will look at the law and try to use the law as the best way possible to protect the citizens. My job is to protect the citizens of Kay County and Noble County, and so I will look at that and try to decide that. Also, even if we decide to file charges, we'll look at the intent and the circumstances, because sometimes we'll just do a deferred sentence where they're not going to get any criminal record of any type, because what they're doing, they meant well, but they did something on an impulse that caused them to do something that was stupid or ill thought out. We are just people, and we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to protect the public, and we try to do the best we can with the information we have. Law enforcement officers are the same thing. They don't want to go to court and testify unless they have to, so they just assume everything be calm and quiet and resolved in a fair and just manner. That's generally how we look at it. I'm glad to answer any questions for any of you that might have, and let Terry take over the podium again to do that. But again, always know that we are available at any time. I have a policy that I have an open door policy. The citizens of Kay County can contact me, can call me, and all that. I don't talk to defendants. Defendants have lawyers, and I cannot talk to defendants. I don't talk to the defendant's mother, because the defendant's mother may tell me something that's bad, and so that they should go through their lawyer. But I do, citizens that just have a concern, I talk to. Terry can tell you he talks to me more than he cares to, but I certainly will be happy to. I represent you all. You're my bosses, and I try to do what I can to protect each and every one of you. Thank you.
Just a few weeks ago, I had a hypothetical question, I sent a text. I would never call directly in your office, because who knows how busy you are at that minute. But I sent a text. He called me the next day and was patient with me. Well, actually, he spent 15, 20 minutes on the phone with me for basically one fairly simple question, but explaining things in detail. So he is truly reachable. But like I said, I would recommend send a text rather, invariably, if I call somebody, I call them when they're in the deepest pit of a mud. So, okay. Now, first off, put my phone number up if you would, Stephen. Those of you that are listening, let me button the mic here. Those of you that are listening online, my phone number is on the board here behind me. If you have any questions, text them to me, and I will ask them for you, and you can hear the answer live. And let's see, one thing he mentioned, I want to cover one thing. I was a hippie. I had a ponytail down, I could tuck it in my belt back, this was a long time ago. And at least half of the times that I've been stopped on a traffic stop by police officers, they let me go. They either give me a written or a verbal warning. And I was not, especially back in the 70s, hippies and cops didn't mix too well. But it's because anytime I get stopped, I roll the windows down. When they walk up, I've got both hands up here where they can see them. I don't turn loose of the steering wheel until they know that I'm reaching into my glove box to get my paperwork. And you're not required by law in Oklahoma to inform an officer, but I always do. I had a friend of mine, he was a deputy in Bernalillo County, that's Albuquerque, New Mexico. He stopped a car into Harris Canyon, walked up to the car, and he caught a 10-millimeter slug right here. Blew the whole top of his head off. And the only reason they caught the guy, when he walked up to the car, and you'll see this a lot of times in videos, he touched the rear driver's side tail light. So his fingerprints were on the car. So when they found the car and the guy in it, they knew they had the guy. So anyway, just keep in mind, folks, every time these guys walk up to a car, they don't have any idea at all if they're going to go home and see their wife and kids that evening. Just keep that in mind. There are bad cops out there, but let me tell you something, there's a hell of a lot more bad thugs. And every police department has a system in place to identify, correct, or eliminate the bad officers. The good cops I know, they dislike the bad officers worse than the public does because it gives them a bad name. Anyway, that's enough of me preaching on that. Okay, we're only allowing questions on topic. We're not going to ask Brian about something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. If you've got a question like that, contact him. He'll be glad to discuss it with you. But today we're staying on topic, which is the bill primarily, but also, since we're a 2A group, any general questions about 2A or any questions you might have with him about if something's legal or not, those are certainly open. Those of you that were here last week may know what I'm talking about. So, let's see. Please get to your question quickly. One thing we need to be thankful of, we live in Kay County. Brian is our district attorney. It's a whole different case if you use a gun for self-defense in Oklahoma County or Tulsa County and maybe Payne County, I don't know for sure, but these really liberal counties, I expect you to make any comment on this because these are your compadres, but we are blessed to be in rural Oklahoma. Hopefully we never get in a situation. The best gunfight in the world is the one you avoid.
That's right.
You walk away and don't ever pull a gun over emotions. If you're emotional, you need to step back and take a deep breath and get your mind right. Because once you pull that gun, you are legally, morally, and financially responsible for every bullet that leaves that muzzle. So you got to worry about who's behind them. That's one reason I would never carry, they're now legal now, 50 caliber handguns. You know, I would never carry one of those because you shoot somebody in a crowded spot with that, you're able to take out 3 or 4 people in back of it. Those things will drop a grizzly with one shot. So, okay, and as I said, please get to your question quickly. If we have some time afterwards and somebody wants to make a short statement, 15 to 30 seconds, we can get to that. But this time is strictly for questions. Has anybody got any questions over what I just covered? Good deal. I appreciate it. Brian, you're up. Go ahead. Right here.
I'm going to ruin your day.
I had a feeling you might be the first question. Jay will have more than one. Take it from me.
Terry has answered this for me, but I'm still somewhat confused in view from a legal standpoint. And I know the situational things that get involved with this. I live in Blackwell. Okay. We've had a lot of people breaking into cars and that kind of BS at night. You know, ruining cars, pouring paint on them, that type of thing. I'm a night owl. I'm up late. If I hear someone breaking windows in my car or see them messing with my car, etc., I can go out and stop them, or yell at them, tell them to stop, and everything else. If they do not heed the warning, if I say, stop, I'm armed, get away, you know, leave me, leave it alone, and they don't, and they come back at you, maybe verbally, or head your way, coming to you, like I'm gonna kick your butt, you know, when can I fire?
Well, this new law is gonna probably directly affect that, because it does give you more leeway. I would, you know, I've often thought that deadly force meets deadly force. The question is, what you've just described is there's no deadly force. And I think at the point that you feel your life threatened, it's self-defense time. The question is, when does that come in? How close do they come? And that's a fact question that, you know, if you're on your porch and they're across, you know, 50 yards away, you're probably not at risk yet. And if there's just one person versus there's 5 people, and if they had tie irons in their hands versus they had their hands in their pocket and it doesn't look like that, all those things come into play. And again, and a firearm is very not forgiving. Once you pull the trigger, you can't take it back. So my recommendation always is that if you don't feel physically at risk, don't be pulling that trigger. Did you dial 911? Are the police on the way? Have you shown them the firearm, and are they still coming? You know, we know that a person can cover a short distance pretty quickly. They say, you know, sometimes people complain about a law enforcement officer shooting. A person with a knife can cover 5 feet very quickly and put the officer at risk. So none of my things are answering your question. But I don't think there's a good answer. I think it's all facts and circumstances. I just worry about a 13-year-old kid getting shot who's messing up your car. But see, this seems to say you have the right to protect your property. And if they're pouring paint on your property, this seems to say you can do that.
Even if you don't feel physically threatened?
It doesn't, I don't think this law requires you to be physically threatened. I think it's merely the fact that your property is at risk. That is the major change of this law. It says, first of all, the first paragraph says it's unlawful for a person to point a firearm, but it does not apply when a person is acting in self-defense of their home or their business or themselves. Okay. Now that's pointing, the point of firearm. So that's a distinction of this portion of it. Again, as I told you, this section deals with pointing. You're asking about firing the firearm.
Yeah. One of the bases of my question is Terry's response when he and I talked about it a week or so ago, and his position was, if you do not feel in danger of your life, don't shoot. But now we're moving to property, that type of thing, and you know, if somebody doesn't want to stop, et cetera, et cetera. And I know it's situational, and I'm not trying to put you in a corner to say it's not black and white, really. I understand that. But if they don't stop, if they're breaking the windows out of my car, and I do have a firearm in the car, and if they're breaking windows and, you know, just general BS, and they won't stop, you know, I know the easy answer is, well, hey, you don't want to kill somebody for $1,000 worth of car windows. You know, is it worth it?
Yeah. This new law, every bit of it is talking about pointing a firearm, not about discharging a firearm. So I think that's the distinction. I think the distinction is that for the misdemeanor count of for wrongfully pointing a firearm, and the felony of feloniously pointing a firearm, that you can do it for protection. I don't, again, as I mentioned before, deadly force meets deadly force. If they're coming at you and they've got a knife in their hand, they're coming at you and they've got a tire iron in their hand, and you believe reasonably, it's a reasonable man theory. The reasonable man theory, what would a reasonable person do under that circumstance? And if they're coming at you and say, I'm gonna take your head off or whatever, I think you have a right to defend yourself.
Okay, yeah, that's, you know, obviously, if they're breaking the windows out, they're breaking them out with something.
Sure.
You know, and I'm talking, my car is generally speaking about 40 feet from the house, in the driveway or in our carport, et cetera. So that distance can be covered pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You know, and if they've got a tire iron, like you say, or a hammer or whatever that they've been breaking the windows with, and they say, oh, screw you, and comes at you.
I don't think anyone would say you have to take a tire iron to the head before you can shoot your firearm. I don't think anyone would think that was reasonable. I think it's a reasonable man theory. And if a guy's running at you with a tire iron, I mean, I know what I'm gonna do if someone's running at me with a tire iron. I'm gonna discharge my weapon. And I think that most prosecutors would, if they saw that, would agree with that. Now, if he's running at you and he doesn't have anything in his hands, I think that's a much tougher question. I think
Okay.
it depends on, you know, if I'm 85 years old and this guy's 22 and outweighs me and coming at me saying I'm gonna kill you, I think that's, again, everything gets so tougher as you add these different facts in. And I think in the final analysis, we ask you to make a very reasoned decision when you have no time to make a reasoned decision, you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of the difficult things. You're sitting there going, oh my God, what have I got myself into? And this guy is coming to.
Thank you for your response.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I know it varied and wandered a little bit, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
So if somebody's like, say, attempting to burn your house down, you're not in fear for your life. They're just gonna damage your property. It is okay to aim a firearm at them. That's what this is.
The statute says that, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and again, I don't think people would feel badly at you trying to protect your property.
But the only time you should pull the trigger is if you feel threatened.
If there's threatened.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got family members in that house and he's getting ready to he has a torch in his hand, getting ready to light the gas on fire, I think you have a right to use deadly force to protect the lives of others.
Let's say just property. It's still not.
I mean, I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem, but I know that the threat to your property is still real. But yeah, I think that there's problems there. Well, it's understandable why you would shoot, but I don't think it's a legal shoot.
But just to aim.
Okay, you have a right to point, brandish your guns, say back off or I'm gonna shoot. You have a right to do that under this new law, as I see it.
My personal view, this is strictly personal, I'm not an attorney, but,
No, you think you are, but that's.
hey, well, you know what, when you're right about everything, it's hard not to be proud. Neither one, and as many of you know, neither one of my ex-wives ever grasped that concept. Can you imagine?
Can't imagine.
Yeah. If I point a gun at somebody, my guess is about 99 times out of 100, one of two things is gonna happen. They're either gonna turn around and run, or they're gonna attack. And an attack would be an attack, right? Yeah. And I think that's kind of the point of this law. You're not gonna pull a gun out and immediately shoot somebody because they're slitting the tires in your car or something. But if you pull a gun on them and they run away, you've still got the issue with your tires, but you've avoided the gunfight, and that's the best gunfight. But if they pull a weapon, if they start coming at you, I'm gonna make sure that I go home that night. So that's just me personally. Would that something the DA would at least look at that?
We obviously look at it.
Yeah.
Either way, we're gonna look at all facts and circumstances. And again, if you're 6'6", 280 and the guy coming at you is a 13-year-old, I'm gonna say, you don't need to pull a gun, shoot the gun. You can.
And this is a lot easier to say than to remember to do, but if you can pull your phone out and hit record, you've got a video and an audio record of what actually happened.
Hit 911 and then record it.
Oh, yeah, there you go. And you don't even need to talk to 911.
No,
right?
no.
You just hit the button and they get a readout and they'll get the cops. In fact, I bet you get cops even quicker if there's no response.
Especially if the volume's on, you're saying, put that weapon down,
Yeah.
it'll come pretty
Yeah.
quick too.
So just something to think about, or you can get a body cam.
Yeah.
But I had one question before we get on to the next one. You mentioned gangs. Do we have a problem with TDA and MS-13 here in Oklahoma? Or K County specifically, but Oklahoma in general?
In the jails, there's gang presence,
Mhm.
and there are gangs.
Good place for them.
Well, that's where they recruit, that's when people get out of jail, they're out on the street.
Yeah.
Yes, there's problems with gangs,
Oh, right.
and all throughout Oklahoma. And the number of people where we see there's fights because someone has their colors out and the other gang doesn't like their colors out. There is a problem.
That's what happened with that motorcycle accident, was it a year or so ago? There were two bikers, they had one set of colors on, some Hells Angels put into a Buc-ee's or somewhere.
I'm not really.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that's happened.
Turned into a gunfight. The two guys, and they were defending themselves, they left, they got arrested. One of them had US Law Shield, the other one didn't. The one who didn't was out like $180,000 getting it straightened out. So it's a good idea, if you carry a gun, I recommend having some kind of insurance, because it's like, yeah. In fact, Glenn back there has their card with information if you're interested, and they've got a special on, right, for OK2A. And if you carry a gun and you don't have some kind of coverage, it's like driving your car or truck without any insurance. Maybe worse, because a car accident's one thing, a shooting is a whole different level of intensity.
Yeah.
So just FYI. Okay, next question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I do have one. This all sounds like it's surrounding the concept of brandishing, which in many states and in many over-enthusiastic DAs have convicted people for only brandishing, and they've spent time in jail. Is that sort of what this is circling around primarily?
I think our law has changed the groundwork there. I think this new law, you can brandish, protect yourself, protect your property, protect others. I think, again, this is all brand new. I mean, when he signed it last week?
15.
15,
Yeah.
so just a few days ago. So this is brand new to us, and we're gonna, the VAs haven't even had a chance to sit down and talk about it. So I imagine by the end of summer, maybe want to be back, we'll have more information
Yeah.
by then as we start talking about it in our meetings.
Well, these new laws, as cases come to court, judges rule, that gives you precedence, and that kind of determines which way the water's gonna run, right?
Right, and I argue things all the time, the judges disagree with me on what my interpretation is. I'm right, but they just disagree with me. Well, like you, Terry.
Your wife is obviously realized.
Yes.
Don't forget you're on video, you might not want to understand.
Yeah, she's always right.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
I'm gonna say something that got a cringe from Brian at the meeting Thursday night. Before this law in Oklahoma, if you pulled a gun on somebody, you were in less legal jeopardy if you went ahead and shot them than if you didn't. Now, please understand, and Brian emphasizes, I am not telling anybody to pull a gun and shoot somebody.
Sounded like you were saying that.
Well, this is an example of how screwed up the laws were before this. And in fact, Bill Coleman was kind of lukewarm on this, and this is the thing I covered with him to try and get his support. And he did vote for it. Our senator did vote for this bill. It won very handily, but yeah. So, I mean, please, that is not my point. My point is that the laws were stupid before. That you're in less trouble if you go ahead and shoot somebody than if you just pull a gun on him. And wouldn't you agree that's
The
stupid?
law does not always make sense. It used to be the law
Amen.
that you got more trouble if you kicked a police dog than if you kicked a policeman. You know, that's kind of unusual.
Yeah. Any more questions? Okay, we got a few minutes.
I got one, Terry.
Oh, okay, Jim?
The 2818, I heard mention of persons and citizens. Is there a difference?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't know that the law itself mentions citizens, but I did hear you mention it. And I'm really interested in citizenship.
I did not see the word citizen anywhere in the statute. I see persons often. But I did not see the word citizen anywhere.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, like I said, we got a few minutes. Has anybody got any comments, statements they'd like to make? Okay, well, I guess it's time for lunch. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and let's give Brian a hand. It's Memorial Weekend, and he tied up a big chunk of his Saturday to come out here and inform us. And at some point, when you think there's enough case law on the books, I'm glad to have you back anytime. All right. Everybody, thank you for coming, and
Where do we eat?
huh?
Where do we eat?
Your place.
Me too. I didn't have any breakfast.